All right. Good morning and happy Wednesday. I like to call this Thanksgiving Eve. So I'm excited for our interview today. And our guest today is Mr. Bryce Eddy, and he's an entrepreneur, businessman, and speaker. He spent more than 25 years in the risk management, insurance, and security industries. Bryce has spent a lifetime in martial arts and holds a black belt under the legendary Jean Jacques Machado and owns 805 Combat Sports in Southern California. Bryce also sits on the board of one of the country's largest conservative organizations. Bryce also hosts the popular podcast Liberty Station on the Salem Podcast Network and can be seen in the new docu-series Border Battle, currently streaming on SalemNow. Good morning and welcome, Bryce.
Hey, how are you, brother? Thanks for
I
having
am
me.
I'm fantastic, and you're very welcome. I was excited to get you on the show. I kind of caught you by surprise over at Carrera's out of nowhere, and said, "Hey, I think we could make a good show together, and I think we got some good information to share." So I'm excited to have you on here today.
Yeah, no, again, thanks for the invite. It's fun.
Perfect. Well, let's just jump right in. A lot of the listeners and viewers, are martial arts students, martial arts professionals. So I think we'll kind of start there, and then
Sure.
we'll work through some of the other stuff. So, how did you originally get involved in martial arts and jujitsu?
Yeah, so I was a kind of lifelong martial artist in terms of, as a kid, trying a little bit of everything, loved it. I wanted to be, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, whomever else, just like any other kid, growing up in the late 70s and 80s, and that was the thing. And
Right.
I discovered wrestling. So, I did a bunch of different martial arts, and then, did wrestling in high school. And in college there was this crazy thing called the UFC. And in 1993 there's this little skinny, Brazilian guy that doesn't look impressive at all, choking everybody out and, tapping them out and all that. And it's like, what is that? And at the time, all I was doing was, eating the weights in the gym. And that only relieves stress so much, because what I believe is there's no better way to relieve stress from work than choking somebody out afterwards.
That's
So
right.
yeah, so I started in I think it's 96 or 97, somewhere in there. And the first time I went into Jean Jacques Machado's place, which was in Tarzana at the time, there's really only the Gracies and the Machados back in those days.
Right.
I walked in, and Jean Jacques will tell this story to this day, but because I was a wrestler, this is the one and only time they were ever doing a King of the Hill grappling kind of takedown thing. And
Mm.
so I walk in and everybody's lined up, and I get up to the line, and it's Jean Jacques, and he's like, have you ever trained jujitsu? I'm like, no, but I took him in this huge double, like, bang, and then I ended up taking out kind of the whole class, and I'm like, this jujitsu stuff, man, this is nothing. And then finally, this other serious wrestler, Seth Woodall, who's like a sheriff in Slow right now, and the guy was amazing, and he was like 225 or 250 or something crazy at
hmm
that time. So of course he finally takes me out. Well, I think this jujitsu stuff is nothing. I've got it in the bag. So I come back the next day. They treat me like an uncle fighting his little nephew or something like that. I mean, like, I'm a child, I'm a toddler, and I'm arm barred 100 times. I'm choked out, all that stuff. And I think there's two places you go from there. You either say, I will never put myself in that position again. That was too humiliating, and you never return. Or you say, all right, I got to figure this out.
Right. Well, and that's the martial attitude. The martial arts way is we always go towards the adversity where most people are running from that adversary. So yeah, tell me, you mentioned high school and wrestling. Before high school, you're a lifelong martial artist. Did you do other systems, other styles
Yeah.
of martial arts before jujitsu?
Yeah. Tang Sudo. I did a little bit of Taekwondo, a little bit of Aikido. It was all in, like, 1 or 2 or 3 year stints.
hmm
And again, I think I'm lifelong grappler. My dad had polio when he was 2 and walked on
Mm,
crutches his whole life. We did not throw the baseball in the backyard. We wrestled in the living room when my dad would
mm.
take off his crutches, right? And he'd be down on the ground and he would wrestle us kids. So I kind of had that spirit already in me,
Right.
and I loved it.
Nice. Now you're speaking my language because you brought up the fact that you took Tong Sudo. Who did you train with in Tong Sudo, and when was that?
I do not honestly remember. We were
Okay.
talking, this was in Chatsworth in
Okay.
like 1980 something or other. So
Okay.
yeah, so I don't remember and I couldn't tell you anything about it. It was so long ago now at this point.
Well, that's okay, but I mean the fact that you brought up Tong Soo because those are my roots, and then
Yeah,
of course you mentioned Chatsworth, where my instructor, Mr. Mark Cox, has a school in Chatsworth. He didn't open until early '90s, so he probably wasn't. It wasn't him, but just very interesting. My instructor Dennis Ichikawa probably taught everybody that learned
yeah.
Tong Soo in the Ventura County area, and you also wrestled. So you wrestled in high school. Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the Canal Valley?
I grew up in Chatsworth.
You grew up
Yeah.
in Chatsworth. Okay.
Yeah,
And did
so
you
I
go
mean,
to
I was born in Philadelphia. My dad was going to school back there with my mom, but they were originally from here. My dad was a pastor, and theologian, and came back here to California after going to school. But we were little kids, born in Philadelphia, and then brought back to the Valley. So for all intents and purposes, I'm a Valley boy.
a Valley boy? All right, right on. Well, definitely a different place and a different time growing up then versus what the San Fernando Valley has turned into now, right?
For sure.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in the Valley? What were some great memories, some things that you did above and beyond the martial arts and wrestling?
Yeah, you know
What
what
kind of
I
what
mean.
kind of trouble did you get in? Is what I'm getting at.
Listen, I was actually a pretty good kid. I was a trouble-free, kid. I was an LAPD explorer. I was, pretty industrious, climbing the hills of Chatsworth. You had all that rock climbing and
Oh yeah.
Rocky Peak, Stony Point there.
Hmm.
All of that stuff was my life. So yeah, I I think I was a, pretty solid, pretty good kid. I got in trouble, way late in life. Even being a preacher's kid, I was a pretty good kid. So,
Well, let's talk about that. Growing up, your dad was a pastor. How did that influence your life? How did that what kind of things do you think that you carry into your life now, being brought up by your father being a pastor?
yeah. So, I mean, I have a Christian worldview and Christian underpinnings. I am a follower of Christ. Did not lead a, of course, perfect life. I mean, no one does. But because I think as a young man growing up in that situation, it takes a lot to eventually make it your own. And I actually, in some respects, envy the guys that, come to Christ after, a life of brutality and bad decision making, and then, have that moment. Because I think that sometimes those are the most authentic guys in the way that they live their life, because you can
Hmm.
easily, as a Christian man or Christian kid, you can play the game. You can pretend, how are you, brother? Love you so much, amen, God bless, and you could be
Hmm.
living a terrible life and you could be doing all kinds of things wrong, but you have that semblance of Christianity. And so I
Hmm.
think all of us have to find the path to make that our own. And I did really in my early 20s. And again, not a single one of us don't go through times where we're not living as we should. But yeah, I believe in Christ, and I believe that we have a God and we have some obligations to Him.
Absolutely, and we'll come back to this because I know we'll be talking about some other things a little bit later where this really all ties in as well. But let's go back to high school. What were your goals and plans in high school? You wrestled a little bit. Did you ever plan on taking that further into college? Did you go to college, and what did you study?
Yeah, so I was a poor student, and when I say that, I got good grades because I could figure it out. I read constantly in class and ignored almost everything. I loved to read, and I would consume, a couple of books a week. And so I would be not paying attention to the teachers, but I was enough of an auditory guy that I could be taking a test and kind of remember them saying something as I was
Hmm.
actually reading and paying attention to other things. So when I decided on college, I mean, I went to a couple of years of Moore Park and just junior college and did not care for it. It felt like 13th grade for me. I wanted to get
Mm,
after it in business. I wanted to do other things. I was a self-starter when it came to, kind of figuring my way out in the world. And I would look at some of these dummies around me that were completely lost and had no idea what they were doing. And I just wasn't interested. Plus, a
mhm,
lot of, for me, the uh, courses that you could take in college at the time, they didn't relate to anything I really wanted to do. And
mhm,
I, um, I found that a lot of that stuff you could read the book and figure it out. I wasn't getting any practical stuff from it.
mhm,
So I dropped out. I went into the insurance business. At the church that we were attending at the time, I had second pew in from the front was this charismatic dude with a beautiful wife, couple of nice looking kids, and he drove a great car. And I was like, man, what does that guy do? So I ended up working for him.
Nice. Well, real quick, let me jump in here. We got a guest watching, Jose Escobar, leader of our Connected Leaders Academy. Thanks for joining in, and thanks for tuning in. He loves your bookshelf behind you. If you ever watch his podcast and watch his videos, you'll see a huge bookshelf behind him as well.
I'll
Uh,
have to catch it. Yeah.
Jose, if you got any questions for Bryce as we're going through, please drop those questions. So, Bryce, you were in church. You saw a dude that drove a nice car, had the family, had all the things. He looked the part, and you said, "Man, what does he do? I want to do what he does." So what did he do?
Yeah. Well, so he was an insurance broker. And he ended up eventually becoming our supervisor here in Ventura County. Peter Foy was his name, and he was
Mm,
a amazing guy, a great leader, and took a chance on me, and I quickly became one of his top sales guys. And it's a grind. I mean, being an insurance broker is a beautiful path you can take in life, but it's 3 or 4 years of a real desperate grind. And back in those days, you were walking office parks. I mean, everything that we did, we weren't selling life insurance, we were selling business insurance. And so,
mm-hmm,
you're making hundreds of phone calls, and you're again walking business parks, trying to figure out who makes decisions on these things and developing relationships over time. And but once you do that, I mean, it's a wonderful business, residual income. I mean, it can afford an amazing lifestyle.
hmm. Well, interesting. I have a really good friend, Daniel Groff, who owns Insurance Brokers West here in Moore Park, and so I'm familiar. I have a lot of friends in the insurance business as well. But another crazy, just kind of side note is that Peter Foy. I actually happened to coach his grandson in baseball when he was in Shetland division, so I got to know the
Cool.
family pretty well too. But so you went into the insurance business, and where did that take you next?
Yeah, so I mean, I spend a total. I've always been again entrepreneurial guy. I spent a total of, I mean, I started working for him when I was 16. Had some fits and starts in it, but learned the business. Went to work for another company. Thought I wanted a different sales job when I was, just turning 21. Worked for a retired Air Force colonel who was 75 years old, and he was a former fighter pilot, and I learned a ton of stuff from him. So the couple of years I did that was just absolutely amazing. But at the same time, I kind of continued on that trajectory, built a nice block of business. We sold I was a partner in a firm here regionally that was almost 100 years old. We sold out to a big multiple billion-dollar enterprise. It's private equity backed. I'm an executive vice president with that firm, still under contract for a few more years with them. And our CEO is now the regional head. My former partners are all in great positions in that. But even during all of that time, I was doing security consulting. I was continuing to train and teach jujitsu. I had a art business where I managed a few fine artists, oil on canvas guys, and would go on tour with them. I had all kinds of other things sort of constantly going on in my life. I'm a little bit of a restless individual. I've got a lot of energy, and love to pursue things in life. And
Mhm.
that can be dangerous, right? Because if you want to build the biggest block of business in, the entire country as far as the insurance game, you're going to take your eye off that ball a little bit. Now I've been blessed because I have a great big block of business. I've got 11 people that are dedicated just on my team that have been with me for many years. We have amazing clients, many of which are very well known. And, my team, because of the way I treat them, they support me in doing all of my other adventures, which, because of the nature of a lot of the other adventurous things that I do, that leads to other business, that leads to me growing my insurance business at the same time.
Hmm. That's amazing. That's awesome. Let's bring this up. Jose does have a question. Do you have? I knew he was going to ask this question. Do you have a morning and evening routine? If so, what does that look like? And he just loves to ask successful entrepreneurs that question.
Yeah, so it's funny. It's changed a lot since the 2020 pandemic, and I have my ideal morning routines, and then I have which I aim for. You aim for, the way I look at it in life. I aim for sevens, right? And sometimes you get tens, and man, that was an awesome morning. I did everything perfect. But I think people beat themselves up sometimes. I do believe in win the morning, win the day, right?
Hmm.
And that means that you need to rise early, and you need to have a positive routine that, for me, it includes bulletproof coffee. It includes doing my devotions. It includes reading. I try to read for quite a bit in the morning on things that I'm trying to either learn, or business books, or things that I find interesting. I read fiction at night. That's my wind down. I have been very serious about not taking electronics to bed anymore. I think we've fallen into terrible slavery when it comes to the screens, and so I'm making sure that I'm not doing that anymore. But
Hmm.
but all of us, I think, got caught a little bit into that trap.
Yeah.
I work out in the mornings, but I work out kind of late in the morning. So what I do is I'll do my little personal morning routine. Then I will hit a workout at about, well, I'll organize my day. I'll deploy my team. I'll answer emails. I'll, clear out my morning inbox. I'll plan for the day. And then now I go and I do an 8:30 a.m. CrossFit class.
Hmm.
And that's been working really well for me. So most of my first appointments of the day, and again, this has been possible because of COVID, because we're not doing as many meetings where we have to drive places. So I'll do my
Hmm.
first meetings at 10 or 11 a.m., and then the rest of the day kind of goes from there.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks for answering that. And Jose, thanks for asking the question. We talk about reading a little bit. Jose, you got your book coming out. Please drop a link for your book coming out about your morning and evening routine. I suggest everybody take a look at that. And while we're talking about books, Bryce, is there anything that you're reading now or you've read recently that you would recommend? And I actually posted a poll on my Facebook page today just about that. What are you reading?
Yeah, so let's see, I should grab it. So, I have a podcast, and my podcast is number 84 on political news and commentary now. So, I'm reading a couple of books of guests that are coming in. One is Eric Metaxas's book, Letter to the American Church, which I think is great, and I'm going to be interviewing him in a week or so. And he's become a good friend over the years. So I'm reading that now. I have like a stack over here of like 10 different books that I'm ordering through. But I'm also reading a very interesting book right now called, I believe it's Quiet Weapons for a Silent War. It might be the reverse of that. But anyway, it's a 68 page book that was said to be found in a copy machine that a employee from Boeing bought for parts that they could
Hmm.
dismantle and then publish this thing. And it talks really about how the nefarious powers in our let's call it globalist reach would like to subdue all of us. independent folks. And it's a pretty interesting read. And I'm going to be talking about that on the podcast with Dr. Keith Rose, who's a former CIA NOC and a good buddy of mine.
Excellent. Well, tell us while we're on the subject, and a quick shout out, Dana Abbott. Thank you for checking in today. Past guest on the show, my samurai warrior friend. Thank you for being on today. Let me know if you have any questions, Dana. While we're talking about your podcast, tell us a little bit about it. How'd you start your podcast? How long you've been doing it? Who are the people that you're reaching out to and you have on your show?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, Chris Dunn over at Covered Six and I did a 23 episode during 2020 for about 6 months. We did something called the Tabletop Debrief, and
Mhm.
our only thing, I mean, it was had a lot of our military friends, a lot of our law enforcement friends, and a lot of mixed martial artists, and a lot of just buddies of ours, and some really interesting people, world-class shooters like Taryn Butler, just, interesting folks. And that was kind of the only rule. And we really had fun doing it, and it would descend into all kinds of the crazy things that are going on these days. We're in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, we
Mhm.
were on record saying that we were going to have riots before George Floyd was killed. We were predicting, again, not because we're smart, but because there's this playbook for how you sort of disintegrate great nations. And so we were having fun with that, and I enjoyed it. And then during the pandemic, at the same time, the church that we attend, stayed open, fought against the government and won. And there was a live stream that went on every single night for that entire time of the pandemic and the shutdown. So 7 days a week, live stream, 7 p.m. And I got invited on that a bunch of times. And then from there, we got invited to do a little radio interview. I mean, a radio spot, like a audition for
Mhm.
a Salem station that lost the host, and they were, transitioning to a new host. So we did a couple of weeks of that, and through some of my contacts and friends at Salem, they said, "Hey, this is great. Why don't you guys think about doing a podcast on our platform?" Negotiated the deal with them, and we've been growing quite a bit. My thing is interesting people talking about interesting things in the interesting times we're in.
Mhm.
You're not going to love me if you're a socialist or a communist. You're not going to love me if you're into a lot of that stuff. But if you are paying attention to things that are going on around you, you'll have fun. And we get great guests. And like I said, we're 84 now on political news and commentary. We're climbing the charts, making money, and we have a full suite of advertisers and beautiful studio. And yeah, it's a blast.
Very cool. Now, was that a dream, a goal, something that you had planned out, or did it just kind of like the opportunities just kept knocking and you just kept grabbing them as you went? Because that sounds like a big deal, right? Here we are on a podcast, right? On 7 different platforms. People ask me all the time, what are your goals? And I mean, I don't think that I'm trying to make myself, get famous. I like you. I just like to interview,
Yeah.
interesting people that have interesting stories that hopefully will inspire somebody else. Maybe ask a couple questions, learn a little bit, talk about what you're reading, things like that. But did you have the goal to go this big?
I didn't, when I was, building my insurance business, there's a lot of talk radio, right? And
Hmm.
I didn't really listen to music while driving. I listened to talk radio. And so I would listen to, people like Dennis Prager and others who, they ended up having the PragerU company party at my house during the pandemic. Got to be friendly and close to a lot of these organizations. I would get invited on some of these shows for various
Hmm.
things. I speak on crime. I, have some insight into, what's going on down in the border, and, other things like that I've been able to participate in. And so I always enjoyed it, and it never seemed like it was work. And then
Hmm.
so when this opportunity came up and we started to do it, it's just been fun. And it turns
Hmm.
out, we're making great money from it. Our reach is huge now. It's become national. I get all kinds of hate, which is amusing to me. You know,
Well, I gotta. So, were you ever a professional wrestling fan as a kid? Did you ever love professional wrestling?
oh yeah, man, Hulk
So,
Hogan. I
so,
grew up in
so,
the '80s, bro.
right? So you kind of like sometimes you kind of like the heel a
Yeah,
little bit, you know.
yeah.
And there's something I always played the babyface as a wrestler, but I would have always loved to be the heel. Because sometimes I just love that energy coming at you because you get to just kind of play it off. I too love. I look forward to coming in to do my podcast. I love what I do for a living. I love having martial arts school and our restaurant, ice cream, all these. But this is where I really feel like, I mean, I learn a lot. I get to talk with great people like yourself, get to spread a good message out to the community and hopefully broader. But it's just, it's really fun to engage and connect with other people. And it sounds like you've also taken those connections, just to that higher level because you've met some people along the way that have kind of put you in that position to have greater opportunity.
Yeah, people ask all the time because this is a guest-driven show, and you know how that's not easy, right? You have to find guests, and yeah, you've got
Hmm.
some repeat folks and people that you just you jive with, and it's like, hey, come on again, and so
Yep.
that's always fun, but it's a lot. We're obligated contractually. We do 4 a week, and
Wow.
they're 50 minutes long each one, so it's long form conversational style, which that requires a lot, just keeping good conversation going, and I
Hmm.
don't talk this much on my own show.
Right.
Yeah, but I have, because of my background in sales and the insurance business and all of the relationships, that's been my thing over life. I've just kept good friendships.
Hmm.
People are like, "Wow, how were you able to get that guy?" I'm like, "Well, I've known him for 5 years. We're
Hmm.
friends. I see him places." They're like, "Whoa."
Right.
So I've been blessed to just use what I've naturally done my whole life to make that all happen.
Yeah, that's amazing. I look back sometimes too, and I think I'm right around 120 episodes, still kind of starting out. But I look back at some of the guests, I'm like, how did I get like, yeah, well, we've met each other at conventions and events, and we've trained together, and friends of friends. I love the referrals of new guests. So anybody watching, I would love to interview anybody that you think might be a good guest. And Bryce, I'll definitely ask you that question at the end. If there's someone that you think would be a good guest on the show. But I mean, it's so, I don't know, it's just so fun. And it doesn't really matter. I want to get back to what you're saying. If you're a socialist or you're a communist, they're not going to like you. What has happened? What has happened to our world that like you have to be on this side or you have to be on that side? Like, what the hell is going on?
Well, I'll tell you simply, it's kind of not our fault. And by that, I mean, we have a corporatist, elite oligarchy that benefits from all of us being at each other's throats. It benefits from a, tribal divide in the country. We are being fleeced. All of us are having money taken out of our pockets. All of us in the middle class are being destroyed by folks that don't care about us, that have entirely different aims and entirely different goals. But if we can all be at each other's throats and hate each other and be distracted by all that sort of stuff, boy, they just dip right into our pockets. So, and I'm scratching the surface of some really kind of crazy and wild things that, by the way, they're not conspiracy theories because they're right out there in the open. They're written about, and so it's a wild kind of a thing.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I mean, looking at the global and national level, right? That's crazy. But I mean, I'm looking at things at the local level that are just getting so ridiculous. I mean, we got all kinds of things going on in the Caneo Valley. I've seen a lot of politics stuff, here just in our own community. It's just wild
Yeah,
how much how far that goes,
yeah.
and we probably don't want to turn this into a huge political debate and discussion, but I think that everybody can agree that it's just it's out of hand. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that I believe we need moral clarity on, right? And those are some of the things that I'm hated the most for, is because I
Hmm.
have said, and I'll give just one to tease the audience, but I have said, very boldly that I believe it's evil for us to tell children that happiness lies on the other side of puberty blockers or double mastectomies. I don't believe that that's something that we should be going down the path on. And I would have thought that reasonable people would agree on that. I don't really care what you do as an adult. I don't really care. I'm more of a libertarian when it comes to those things. I do believe that God's going to judge us all individually for our behavior here on earth. But on a couple of things, I think it's incumbent upon us to protect children. I think it's important. I mean, I've rescued kids from human trafficking, down on the border. You mentioned in my bio the Border Battle documentary, which
Hmm.
is a docu-series. It's really amazing. We're featured in it. We were down there doing work. I believe very fiercely in some of those things, and you would think that we could all come together on just those little fine points. Again, let your freak flag fly on everything else. Do what you want to do in life. I'm not going to get in your way, but let's protect kids. That has made me reviled in the space. Now, what's funny? I truly am not a person, and I think that most people need to learn this. I do not need to be liked. No, I'd prefer to be liked rather than hated, but, it doesn't get my pulse up to be disliked. It
Hmm.
doesn't bother me at all. I've got an amazing family. I've got amazing friends. I've curated unbelievable relationships and friendships. So, I'm not really bothered by the hate. And I think you need to walk through life with that. Be, confident in who you are. Do not try to please man. Try to be exactly who you need to be.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Great, really good. I want to come back because you've talked, about a lot of, you have friends and buddies, law enforcement, military. Now, do you have experience in law enforcement or in the military?
No, my foray, I was uh blessed to be in the early days of mixed martial arts where we were teaching law enforcement agencies arrest control. A lot of
Mm.
the guys that were, coming up through the department back then were starting to get a little taste of jujitsu. And, we were able to work with a lot of those guys. And then, when I got to be involved with Covered Six and with other security consulting firms and opportunities, I obviously train a ton. I mean, my weekly routine, physically includes 5 days of CrossFit, 2 to 3 days of teaching jujitsu, training jujitsu. Every time I teach, I roll the entire time, at the end of class as well. So I'm getting good workouts in that. And then it also includes, my tactical training, my continued time, whether it's at our range, Terran Tactical, everywhere else. But because of my, the ethos at Covered Six and the way that we do, all of us work. And so, I've done over the years a lot of security gigs. I've done a lot of EP gigs. I've done things out in the desert. We've done operations like our private public partnership with Beverly Hills. I've lined up in skirmish lines against Antifa, where we've got our own, mobile field force and, anti-riot squad for those of you that don't know what that is. I've been involved in things across the United States that a lot of military guys haven't been able to be involved in their tours of duty, which has been unbelievable blessing for me, something that I would have never thought.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not, some, crazy tactical guy or anything like that. I've just gotten to do some cool, fun stuff.
I bet. I bet. Well, you brought him up a couple times, and Covered Six is right here in my backyard in Moorpark, California. Can you tell us a little bit more about Covered Six and the company, and
Yeah.
just the things they do?
Yeah, sure. Chris Dunn, who's the visionary and CEO and owner over there, knew that the world was going to be falling apart, and knew that 13 plus years ago when he started the company, and realized that not only did you need a better training company, right? You need to train both civilian and professionals and security guys a better way of doing things. The 1990s window licker security model of just deterrence. Oh, there's a guy, we better, not misbehave, is gone away. And we had talked over the years, and again, we're on record saying all kinds of things that have come true in regards to crime and what was happening, because they were taking tools away from the police. They were diminishing and disheartening the law enforcement and military personnel in this country. They were, systemically and systematically destroying our law and order, structure in society. And so, when he began that, he knew that, okay, you need better training, you need better resources. So how do we build them? And um, over time, it became, and this was part of the goal, a vocational training school for military veterans. So guys that are coming off a deployment are coming through the 5 courses that covered 6 offers, 3 of which are cyber security courses, 2 of which are an executive protection specialist, and then physical security specialist. And they're 5-week, 200-hour courses. They get paid for under the GI Bill, and I think there's right now, I think we're at a 87% placement for jobs after people graduate from these academies. Also, just about to bring on a fire academy, so Wildland 2, fire academy that will help. Again, what we do is we augment police forces, augment fire service, and add that kind of private partnership to making sure things get taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's an amazing resource, right here in our backyard, and
It
for
is.
people to take advantage of. If I remember correctly, Chris has a background in Krav Maga. I believe he trained at Worldwood, and I know my instructor Mark Cox knows him pretty well. They go back a ways, so I don't know him
Yeah,
quite as well.
and
Um,
I knew Mark's
being right here,
brother.
David.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
David, who is working for Zoe International, and he's
Yep.
a good friend, and we've done some things for them, and yeah, so it's a small world.
Yeah, it really is, especially when you're in tight with everything that's going on.
Yeah, well, Chris will also tell you he's a jujitsu guy too.
There you go. Let's talk a little bit about 805 Combat Sports. Now, is that your gym?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I've got a partner in that. It's Mark Morellis and I. So Mark is a former LAPD officer, retired a couple of years ago. He's a 4-time Medal of Valor winner. I mean, a salty dog. He and I have been training jujitsu for many years together. He's also a Jean Jacques Machado black belt. So we came up together. We the 805 Combat Sports is kind of our corporate name, but we're the 805 Machado Jiu-Jitsu affiliate in town, and we're in Simi Valley, near the Vallarta off of First Street and LA Avenue.
Yep.
And yeah, and our philosophy. So first, we've got a ton of law enforcement there, and I believe I'm teaching a superpower. We don't teach let's call it sport jujitsu. We teach the old school way of doing jujitsu, and so some of the other schools in town, aren't particularly fond of us. I mean, we've got others where they came from the Machado background and we're all friends, but there's a couple of schools in Simi that won't allow their people to come to our open mat. And partly because we spend a lot of time rolling, and we again, being old school, that's how we determine the pecking order. And, we'll choke those guys out.
That's awesome. Hey, my wife is watching right now, and she says, "I absolutely love what you do and what you stand for. We're lucky to have you in our backyard." So, yeah,
Awesome.
I agree with that as well. Um, yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, there's definitely there's definitely that old school. I know when we train jujitsu, we talk about Krav Jitsu, because in jujitsu typically there's not a lot of striking, and a lot of schools focus on the sport, which I think is great for those that want to compete. But when you're talking about for a self defense art, that's a whole different ball game. That's a totally different game.
Agree, and I'll tell you. So this is what a lot of people don't know. So I mean, Jean Jacques Machado in our school. So Eddie Bravo, was a classmate of mine. Joe Rogan was a classmate of mine. A lot of people that are pretty famous over the years came out of our school, and we were all on the mats together. At the end of class in the early days, okay, so we would do our gi, jujitsu. We'd do our traditional stuff. We'd roll for a good 45 minutes. I mean, which is pretty intense
Oh,
for,
yeah.
jujitsu training, right? That's a lot of rounds. As if you've ever wrestled or grappled, that takes a lot of energy after you. At the end of class, off come our gis, and we're smacking each other and we're raining bombs down on each other and we're playing that. And that went on a lot. That was the old school way. I mean, jiu-jitsu back in the day was also not pulling guard, falling down to the ground, hoping for the best, trying to tie somebody up. No, my style of jiu-jitsu, I'll stay on top and I will murder you. I mean, it's a different world. Now, as a black belt training students, I'll pull them into my guard. I'll, give them a side control. I'll put myself in bad positions over and over again. That's different. But if I want to dominate you, I'll dominate you. I will make you sick with my knee on belly, which is, sort of the standard here in the universe.
Love it. Love it. People watching this right now that are not martial artists are probably going, "What in the world are these guys talking about? This is intense. This is
Yes.
insane." But you know,
Yes. I'm not
we
really going to murder you.
yeah, probably not. We look at what's going on in our communities, and I'll just share with you. We had an incident just the other day where uh, someone had a loaded gun sitting outside of one of our businesses, waving the gun at our employees and people walking by.
Wow.
Right here in Moore Park, where Moore Park is the third safest city in the country, and we got shit like this that's going on, and there are still people. Because I get a little bit irritated. Have you ever thought about trying martial arts? Have you ever thought about learning self defense? No, I just don't think I could do it. And it's like, do you know how to swim? Yes. Why? Well, because I don't want to drown. Well, so you should probably know some form of self defense or martial arts, and people just really kind of put their head in the sand on that. Um, but I mean, there's these situations that are going on all around us. The homeless situation is getting worse in our areas, which brings desperation. Bad things happen. Timing is everything. Talk a little bit about that and how you address this in your school and in your community.
Yeah, yeah. So the breakdown is real. And what's interesting is it's a lot worse than people think. And partly because there's a lot of things that go underreported as to what's really happening. But we are not in a safe community anymore. Now, we are relative to, let's say, Los Angeles and things like that. And God bless the Ventura County Sheriff's Department, because they are doing police work, and there's a lot of places where they aren't. Right? The Ventura County Sheriffs, they'll show up, and they'll show up quickly. But you do not want to be relying upon law enforcement. You have to have something in you. Not everybody's going to dedicate themselves to a martial arts practice, but you at the very least need to learn situational awareness. You need to learn just basic defensive things to keep you aware and keep you out of trouble. A lot of people are walking around like zombies, connected permanently to their phones, not paying attention to anything that's going on, and they're walking themselves into trouble.
Hmm.
And we at the very least need to be teaching that. Now if you can take that to the next level and just start to learn some basic self-defense, you're going to be less of a victim. If you can then project that, which people, oftentimes once they start to learn some things, they start to project, their heads up, they're looking around, they're positive, they've got a little bit of a force of spirit that make other people just, I'm not going to mess with them.
Right.
And then there's all kinds of things that go along that continuum, all the way on up to using tools for self-defense, on all the way on up to, deadly tools. But,
Hmm.
there's a lot of stops along the way that people need to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with all of that 100%. And quick shout out to a Facebook user. I apologize, I don't see your name, but he just wanted to let us know that his Wataru karate is based on jujitsu and Aido. So thank you. Thanks for sharing that. Would love to know who that is, by the way. So if you want to drop your name, please let us know. And any other questions you have. Um, so we're talking about self defense, we're talking about situational awareness, we're talking about the safety in our communities. We have. Curriculum that is taught in our schools that is questionable at best. But we can't even get self-defense into our schools. How do you think? I mean, how do you think that's going to go? What do you think it would take for us? And not to mention, they are doing a better job, I think, of doing active shooter training with the schools and the teachers. Um, but what about the students, and what about them knowing what's going on? Do you think we're doing enough?
I've got mixed thoughts about that. So, we have contracts with schools and universities. We, provide public safety, for Pepperdine. We've got a number of school districts around the country, private and public schools, that we have guards at. And, again, very highly trained, very active. I mean, we're making arrests on campus. So it's not, again, just a, static guard standing somewhere, looking fearsome but not doing anything. We have active programs, so we're working very hard to keep kids safe. I'm reluctant to suggest that in a formal way schools start to get people to train in self-defense and things like that, because anytime you turn some of those responsibilities over to the government, they mess it up. And they'll turn it over to some knucklehead who won an RFP process, and they're teaching total bullshito. That I don't think that it's necessarily the place for the state to take on those responsibilities. They can't educate our children properly. But I'm a homeschool dad. Okay, so I believe it's incumbent upon us as parents to spend the time to teach our kids those things.
Mhm.
Now, again, I don't need to outsource that to somebody else, but there's you and there's me and our school, that other parents can bring. We've got an awesome kids program. I know that that's, one of the things you guys do best. So, instead of spending all of the time on useless pursuits, I'm going to offend all of the baseball players here right now. Don't spend 20 hours a week teaching your kid baseball. Put them in a martial art. Now, if you can do both, great. All right, whatever. I'm not big though on a lot of the energy that is spent with families surrounding some of these sports that the kid will probably never play again, and is probably not learning that many useful long-term skills. Martial arts, you will, and they will.
Man, you hit the nail right on the head. And this is coming from a martial arts school owner myself and a son who played baseball for 10 years. So I mean, hey, we love baseball, but I agree 100%. Baseball serves a purpose of an extra activity. For some people, it could be, getting them into college and a career. I've had several, students that went on to play baseball at the higher levels. Not discounting it whatsoever, but martial arts is a skill, a long term skill. So many things from just the mental aspect to the physical aspect, all the way down.
Yeah, and if we're talking about that, I do think, I mean, I'll get on a little bit of a soapbox here. I think we as parents are ignoring valuable lifelong tracks that we can put our kids on. So, my three daughters are very high level musicians. They play violin, piano, they sing, they perform in all of those. They lead worship at churches. They are in multiple orchestras. I mean, they are now, very successful performers as well. My oldest also plays the drums. She gets paid to play the drums places now. The girls have made it a career out of it. My oldest two are 19 and 18, and now, teach piano, teach, beginner violin, beginner piano. And we treated music as a subject in school as a part of their curriculum, and we knew that that was going to be something that, if you do correctly over time, they're going to have a skill for life. Now, not every kid is going to be, going down that on a permanent basis, but we as parents spend so much time having our kids invest in things that might just be fun or amusing. And,
Hmm.
again, there's some, team building aspects. There's some things to, kids' sports that are
Hmm.
valuable. But I think you need to have your kids be experiencing a lot of these things. But you need to go at it with the mindset of, how do I give them skills that equip them for life?
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, the challenge is, and I've found myself in the same situation. We've gotten involved in an activity, whether it was, baseball or football or something else. And, you build this group of, a community, a team of people. And, Johnny's doing it next year, so we're going to stick with
Yeah.
it. Johnny's doing travel ball. Man, we got to jump on that track. We don't want to miss. We don't want to miss our spot, but we're looking through this small of a scope versus looking at, like you're saying, looking at a skill that they could have for life. And
Yeah.
again, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. I kind of see it also from the point of, I've been stuck in that. I've been
Yeah.
stuck in that. We're putting all this time and all this money into a sport and an activity that, in the end, like I said, my son played for 10 years of baseball. I can't tell you the thousands of dollars, and he could care less about baseball. Could
Yeah,
care
well, and
less
that's
about it.
and that's more common than not. The few people that go on for, lifelong, and baseball stardom, and, playing college or whatever, that does happen, but that's infinitesimally small.
Hmm.
What you need to do, though, is, as a parent, decide early, what your kids are going to be about. And now, I don't mean like, okay, I'm going to shape them in a certain way that I want to shape them, but you need to have a mission with your children. And that mission, my wife and I, we decided our goal is to equip them for life. What does that mean? Well, we're not going to tell them that they're great and just, pump up their false self-esteem. No, we're going to give them skills. We're going to teach them things that help them to become confident, fully realized human beings. And so, if you start out that way, like we knew early on, we weren't going to put our kids into gymnastics. There's limited value in those pursuits because they end up sucking up all the time. In gymnastics, there's no way to do casual gymnastics. You get tumbling when they're like little children, and then it sucks you in. And then you get that pressure from others. You get that pressure from the coaches. You get that, like, oh no, you've got to commit to this. Are you not committed to this? And then they take, and then pretty soon that becomes what the family revolves around.
Hmm.
The days are gone, like when you and I grew up, where you could do a whole bunch of stuff. You could
Hmm.
test a bunch of stuff. You could, like, just enjoy life. You could play 5 different sports. I think we need to reset back to that because, you don't want kids to not have fun, but now they're making them a career because, I mean, look, the little league children's baseball has become a multiple billion-dollar industry. And that's what's motivating a lot of that peer pressure and a lot of that focus. And I think as parents, man, we need to decide early and we need to be intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember a time, I mean, I did martial arts my whole life, so I
Yeah.
didn't really do other sports, but I dabbled, couple things here. But, most kids would do whatever sport you did it for that season and you moved on. You went to a different sport, and then you went to a different sport, and you never really got sucked in,
Yeah.
all the way. So it was just,
Everybody
yeah,
did
it was.
everything.
Yeah, it was totally different. And now, like, if you're not on a travel team and you're not playing every day of the week all year long at 5 years old, like, you're gonna miss the boat because it's really sad because I've seen kids start at 10, 11 years old, and they can't even enjoy playing the sport
Well, and
because
they
they're
get
so far
injured.
behind.
Yeah, and they get ridiculous injuries, repetitive injuries and things like that don't make sense for kids. How about this one? Hey, my kid just joined the all-star team. My kid's an all-star.
We did it.
Yeah, they're all all-stars if you want to pay the money.
Yeah, well, that's a topic for another day and another show, I'm sure. But hey, real quick, that Facebook user, just want to call her out. That was Pollyanna Cook from Rising Tide Karate in Olympia, Washington. Thank you for watching today. Um, well, Bryce, we're pretty close to that 55-minute mark right here, right now. So I've had a heck of a conversation with you. It's been great. I hope everybody watching has really enjoyed this. If there are any last minute questions, please drop those in the comments, and we're going to close out in just a minute. But Bryce, is there anything else that you want to share with us, or anything else that maybe we didn't talk about just yet that you wanted to put out there to the community?
No, you know what? I think since this is the Master Motivation podcast, I would tell people that, motivation is a, temporary thing. And I think you'd agree with me on this. Whatever we're doing in life, we need to be intentional and we need to be systematic and we need to figure out how to master habits that, help us to grow in life. I think we need to figure out, what our track is. What do we want to run on? And then we have to remember that none of us are perfect, right? So even the most enviable people that you see on earth that you think, man, that guy must be so disciplined. He must be so motivated, all that stuff. Even he struggles from time to time and has to do little resets. And,
Mhm.
we're all in this journey together. And so don't be motivated, be intentional.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny because when I started the show, I didn't really have a name for it, right? It was actually, it came from a group. I had a master fitness group. I don't know, Master Flame was my ring name, and I always just kind of went with that. And then motivation. So, we're talking about motivation, and to me, motivation leads to increased discipline. That discipline is going to help you achieve success. That
Yeah.
success is what's going to help keep you motivated, and it's really that cycle that continues on and on and on, because we're all somewhere in that spot, and we all need just a little push every now and again from within, from each other, whatever it might be, whatever it takes.
Yeah. Well, hey, so if anybody wants to follow me, my Instagram is Super Bryce Eddy, which Super Bryce was my nickname from Jean Jacques Machado himself because I was a beast back in the day. Um, and then if you want to check out our podcast, it's Liberty Station on Salem's Podcast Network. It's soon to be renamed The Bryce Eddy Show because, I had a co-host for about 4 episodes and now we're like, 180 in. And he abandoned me after 4 episodes. So yeah, but we're having a good time. And again, Liberty Station and Super Bryce Eddy if you want to, find out what we're doing.
Thank you. Well, guys, listen, definitely follow Bryce. Check out his podcast. He's got some good stuff. Good. The reason I had you on the show, as I mentioned, I just really believe in your values, and I believe in your message, and I enjoy you sharing that with us today, and I hope that everybody else did too. So hang tight for about 60 seconds while the video plays out, and just reminding everybody that next week we'll be back on Monday. But I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. We all have so much to be thankful for. Enjoy the time with your family, enjoy some good food, and make sure to get a good workout. We'll see you next week on Monday. And thanks again, Bryce Eddy. Appreciate you.
Yeah, amen. Thanks, brother.